And I want to thank all of you who are here today. You have an extraordinary responsibility at land-grant universities and public colleges and universities throughout the United States. We entrust our brightest and our best to your colleges and universities, and we ask you to make them competitive in an extraordinarily competitive world, ever-increasing competitive world. We ask you to instill in them the knowledge and the capacity to reach their highest and best dreams. And you have delivered for the country, time and time again, year after year, year after year. In fact, I think it's appropriate to point out that while there has been a lot of conversation about our public education system as it relates to the K-12 system and the need for us to continue to reform and improve that system, America's advantage educationally has always been, and I think always will remain, at the college and university level. You are the great equalizer. You are the institutions that provide our youngsters with just extraordinary experiences. And you create a learning environment in which not only do young people learn lifetime skills, but they also develop lifetime relationships. And I was thinking about that earlier this morning when I received a long email from a college classmate of mine, a roommate of mine, who we've reconnected recently, and it just occurred to me that those relationships that are built and developed at the university and college level really do last a lifetime, and the older you get, the more important they become. So I'm here first and foremost to thank you, to also acknowledge the tremendous relationship that you have with the USDA. I'm honored to receive this award, but to a certain extent, I think this award belongs to all of those who worked and have worked with me in the state of Iowa as a governor and as a state senator, and now at USDA, the extraordinary folks who work at our ARS labs, the extraordinary people who work in collaboration with the universities on our NIFA grant program. Sonny is in the audience here today, and I think he can attest to the fact that there's just this relationship is just developing great new ideas and new licensing agreements and new business opportunities, and allowing us to maintain our competitive edge. And the great work that's done in extension, taking those ideas that are developed in the lab and making sure that folks out in the rural areas understand and appreciate them and utilize them. I can tell you, as I travel around the world, and I have an extraordinary opportunity to do so in this job, I say this to all of my extension friends, that the one thing that the rest of the world genuinely envies about the United States is this concept of extension, the ability to transfer knowledge out into the countryside and to make a difference, a positive difference in people's lives. So I have a lot to be thankful for and a lot to thank you all for the work that you do. But I'm here today also to talk about a place that's important to me and important to you and important to the country, which is that place called rural America, the place where some of your, in some cases many of your students come from. It's a place that provides this country with most of its food, a good deal of its water, almost all of its energy and domestically produced fuel. And it's a place that disproportionately sends sons and daughters, grandsons and granddaughters off to the military in service to this country, and for the last 10 years to faraway places, putting themselves in harm's way for the protection of us back home. It's an important place, and it needs attention, and it needs folks to advocate for it, because oftentimes in this day and age, it's easy to lose sight of the important contribution that rural America makes to the entire country. But every 5 or 6 years, we have this opportunity, as Congress considers rural policy and farm policy, to remind folks in the context of a farm bill. And that farm bill, I think, has relevance today to this audience, and I'll explain to you in just a few minutes why that is so. But first, I want to tell you what the condition of rural America is today. Everyone knows that the agricultural economy is probably as good as it's been. And even with declining prices in terms of some of our commodities, we still expect and anticipate good income this year. In the last 5 years, we've seen record farm income, we've seen record farm exports, we've seen record expansion of conservation activities, we've seen increased commitment to a new economy in agriculture, and we've seen an effort on the part of those in agriculture to speak about the importance of agriculture and a difficult conversation we're now having about various production processes, folks trying to work together and try to coexist so that American agriculture can continue to be the greatest and best in the world. And certainly you all have had a hand in making sure that happens. And it used to be in rural America that if the farm economy did really well, everybody else in town did well. But because of the extraordinary efficiency of American agriculture, that's no longer necessarily the case. Just consider the fact that 85% of what we consume in this country is produced by probably somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 producers. That's 1/10 of 1% of our entire population. And even if you take the most liberal definition of farming, anyone who produces more than $1,000 of product for sale, that's still less than 1% of the total population of this country. The other 99%, now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations removed from the farm. So it may not be, as it once was, that the ag economy drove the rural economy. 3 statistics recently reported in our ERS Rural Economy at a Glance report struck me as important to convey to audiences like this. First, the dean was kind enough to point out a fact that is often not understood by folks in the United States, which is that poverty isn't just an inner city issue. It is indeed a rural issue. And poverty rates today in rural America are at their highest point in 25 years. Employment. While we've created 7.8 million new jobs since recovering from the Great Recession, there has been no new net job increase in rural America in that time period. All of those new jobs, all of those net new jobs have occurred somewhere else in America. And as a result of those two, persistent poverty and high poverty and lack of economic opportunity, young people are leaving rural America, and for the first time in our history, we saw a decline, an actual decline in numbers of those who live in rural America. Poverty, economic opportunity, population declines, those are wake-up calls for not just those in rural America, not just those in the public education system that serve those populations, but for all of America, because it could potentially compromise the value system that's central to the American experience. The notion that we send our sons and daughters off to war, not because that's the opportunity for them, but because they feel compelled, because they understand that something that gives a value to them must be invested back into. Just as farmers invest back in the land and re-nourish and replenish the land, so too young people who grow up in these rural small towns and areas across the country understand that the country gives them freedom and liberty and they owe something back to it. So what do we do about this? Well, at USDA we've begun a process of trying to complement the agricultural economy. The fact is that natural resources are the central key to economic opportunity in rural America, and we've utilized that in the ag economy for very, very long, and we've used that in the extraction economy for very, very long, but we really needed to complement and overlay the agricultural production economy with complementary economies that would allow us to make the case to young people that there was indeed extraordinary opportunity in rural America. And so we've begun over the last couple of years an effort to strategically revitalize the rural economy, and the land-grant universities, public universities, colleges that cater to rural America have a significant stake and opportunity to assist in the development of that strategy. So let me share briefly what that strategy is. It obviously has to recognize the important role of production agriculture and the need for us to continue to research in crop production and livestock production, ways in which we can mitigate the consequences of climate change, equipping our producers to continue to be the greatest and best in the world. That obviously has to continue, and we have to obviously work together to continue to export our surplus. We are a food-secure nation. We produce virtually everything we need to feed ourselves, but we have a surplus, and we create economic opportunity, nearly 1 million jobs supported by agricultural exports. That has to continue, but it can't stop there. The emergence of local and regional food systems creates an opportunity not just to bring entrepreneurship and innovation into rural America, but it also creates this new opportunity to say to someone who's interested in farming that may not have had the benefit or privilege of growing up in a farm family, may not be inheriting a farm, that they can start in this business in a relatively small way, and instead of marketing to a commodity-based market where there may be benefits to having larger operations and efficiencies that allow you to participate in that market successfully, you now have this opportunity that's growing in America to sell directly to a consumer, to a farmer's market, to a community-supported agricultural activity, to a grocery store that wants to cater to local and regionally produced food and customers' needs and desires for that food. So at USDA, we've begun a process of trying to expand the production system and season for those smaller-sized operations by investing our NRCS resources in high tunnel houses. It's extending that growing season in all parts of the country. That increases the supply of crops that could be directly sold, especially crops in particular, livestock that could be directly sold to consumers. We've really focused on expanding market opportunities by investing in new farmers markets and creating food hubs where all of this locally produced and regionally produced food can be aggregated and then sold to institutional purchasers. We've aggressively promoted the development of those markets, 2,800 new farmers markets in this country in the last couple of years, and 140 new food hubs, many of which were assisted through USDA programs. And we've started a farm-to-school program to make sure that that institutional purchaser in virtually every rural community, that school district, understands and appreciates what is being grown and raised in their local area and has that opportunity to directly contract with those producers. 35 states now are participating in our farm-to-school program. A recent and first-time ever survey of school districts to determine their interest in farm-to-school finds that nearly half of the schools in this country might very well be interested in participating in such a program. That creates a new market opportunity that has hundreds of millions of dollars of economic opportunity that can encourage those small-sized operations. So we need to continue to do that, and we need your help and assistance in developing the business plans and the assistance for beginning farmers and ranchers who want to start small, a better understanding of the science of specialty crop production, a better understanding and appreciation for that high-value opportunity called organic farming. All of that can be added and assisted through the public university system. Colleges and universities educating folks about that opportunity and understanding the role that it plays, because it is now a $4 to $5 billion industry. There are now 107,000 farming operations that are involved in it, and it's growing at a very rapid rate. Production agriculture, local and regional food systems, conservation. Historically, we've thought of conservation in the context of soil erosion, water quality, and air quality. Certainly, our NRCS is engaged in a soil health campaign today. It's creating a watershed framework to improve water quality. To preserve quantity, we're focusing on better restoration and resilience of our forests. And we obviously recognize the traditional role that conservation plays in rural America, but we need to do more than that. We need to leverage that conservation opportunity to create new market opportunities for investment by private sector that might be interested in obtaining a conservation benefit to respond to a regulatory requirement that that industry and private sector entity may have. A power company may need the ability to reduce certain pollutants. Conservation, cover crops, carbon sequestration of agriculture may be a way of responding to that without the necessity of building very expensive infrastructure. An electric company may be producing power through the use of water. They may need to cool that water down to put it back in the stream so that the fish survive better. Instead of building that cooling tower, maybe they work, as they are in the Northwest, with landowners around that stream and that river where the water is taken to reduce naturally the temperature of that stream. Ecosystem market opportunities. The ability to quantify, verify, measure conservation results allows us to market those results to a private sector that's in need of those results. You all can help in developing measurement tools to expand beyond what we have with our Comet Farm tool that is now being used by producers to gauge their carbon and their greenhouse gas impacts of their farming operations and conservation practices. You all can help us develop those new tools that will allow agriculture to take full advantage of new and developed ecosystem markets. We've already invested in nearly 60 of them through our Conservation Innovation Grant Program and other NRCS programs. It also allows us, if we do a better job of preserving our soil and conserving our water, it allows us to expand habitat opportunities, and that, of course, increases hunting and fishing and biking and hiking and outdoor recreational opportunities. And it could allow our rural economy to take better advantage of the $654 billion industry that outdoor recreation represents, capturing more of those tourism dollars in small towns as people travel to hunt and fish and bike and hike and do everything that they do in the outdoors. It's what's behind, in part, our forest planning rule, to focus on the multi-purposes to which forests can be used. And it is now being used with our voluntary access program with landowners through our NRCS programs to be able to encourage more of that outdoor recreation resource coming into rural America. So production, agriculture, local regional food system, conservation, ecosystem markets, and expansion of outdoor recreation. The final cornerstone of this new rural economy is the bio-based economy, of which you are all very familiar because you're all engaged in research on it. The ability to use what we grow to produce virtually everything we need in an economy. I mean, I have seen, as I've traveled to public universities and colleges, extraordinary work that you all are doing. The ability to take plant material and produce a composite material that substitutes for fiberglass that's stronger and lighter that could be used in cars in the future to increase fuel efficiency. The ability to take woody biomass and produce oil. The opportunity to use nanotechnology with that same woody biomass and create armor or optical material that can be used in computers to expand the power of iPhones. The ability to take switchgrass and produce not just fuel but chemicals and polymers. All of that is taking place in America today on college and university campuses and research labs and is translating into business opportunities. 3,100 companies in America today, most of which are located in rural America, now creating this new manufacturing opportunity by taking biomass, bulky biomass, and converting it in small biorefineries into a usable product that's higher value. And you all have a role to play. Now, none of this can happen without the passage of a farm bill. Because frankly, all of the capacities that we have at USDA to help production agriculture, to incent and encourage local and regional food systems, to create new conservation opportunities through ecosystem markets, to take full advantage of the great American outdoors, and to create this bio-based economy are all based on the programs that are in the Farm Bill. Most often we hear discussion of the Farm Bill and the concept of the safety net that's important to farmers and the SNAP program, which is important to struggling families. But we never hear, unfortunately, about what's in the middle of the Farm Bill, which is the guts of this revitalized rural economy, the ability to create jobs. It's a jobs bill. It's a trade promotion bill. It's a conservation bill. It's an energy bill. And it's also a research bill. In the Farm Bill that's working its way through the conference committee, there is the opportunity to increase investment in agricultural research at USDA with developing a foundation that will allow us to attract private sector investment, to leverage our resources more effectively. So all of us, everyone in this room, everyone in this country has a stake in the passage of this Farm Bill. And it needs to be done. It needs to be done this year. And not only will that provide the resources and the continued commitment to research, but it will also have an impact on the budget. Because it's more than just all of those bills I just mentioned. It's also a reform bill and a deficit reduction bill. Why is that important to all of you? Because I know that as soon as the question and answer period starts, somebody's going to stand up at one of those microphones and talk to me about the formula funding for universities. Somebody's going to ask me that question, aren't they, Sonny? And they're going to ask me, maybe going to ask me about the competitive grant program and whether or not we're committed to it, whether we want additional resources, whether we want to be able to starve off the impact of sequestration. Well, the answer to those questions lies in whether or not we get a farm bill done. Now you say, why is that? Well, just consider the challenge that sequester has already created for USDA. 50% of my budget on the discretionary side that gets impacted by these across-the-board cuts that have no capacity to prioritize. 50% of our budget is in 4 areas. It's in food safety, it's in wildland fire suppression, it's in rental assistance for struggling families living in rural America, and It's in the WIC program, Women and Infant Children program. 50% of our budget in those 4 areas. Notice all the rest of USDA, including all of what's done at REE, all of that grant stuff that you all like, is in the other 50%. So when sequester comes along, it's pretty difficult to say we're not going to invest in food safety. It's pretty hard to tell folks when the forests are burning that we're not putting the fire out. Do you really think we're going to kick people out of housing? And when 50% of American children and young parents are involved in the WIC program, it's kind of hard to reduce that. In fact, all 4 of those things have seen increases. So when we have sequester, we not only have to reduce our 50% over here by the sequester amount, which was 5.2%, and then Congress added another 2% or so on top of that this last year for a 7.5% cut. Not only do we have to absorb that on this 50%, but we also have to absorb the cut of this 50% over here. So it's a 15% cut. And any increase that occurs has to be absorbed over here. So you see that the discretionary part of our budget is already given at the office. And that's true for virtually every department of the federal government. So now all of a sudden folks are concerned about the next round of sequester cuts, not because of what it's going to do to USDA's budget, because of what it's going to do to the Defense Department's budget. And there's a concern about that. So they want to look for a way to alleviate the pressure off the Defense Department budget. Well, there are 2 ways to do that. You can either cut everyone else's discretionary budget a little bit more, but we've already given it the office. Or you can look at mandatory spending. You can start talking about Medicare, Social Security, tax increases, but there doesn't seem to be much of an appetite to talk about that. But there are mandatory programs within the USDA's Farm Bill programs. So the ability to potentially save money in the Farm Bill now becomes not just a way of passing the Farm Bill, but also potentially a way of passing a budget, taking some of the pressure off the discretionary part of the budget, which allows us to look at ways in which we potentially could maintain and increase our commitment to research. So you see, you have many reasons for wanting a Farm Bill. And we need to join forces to make sure that that message is conveyed to our friends in Congress, that we actually see the opportunity for growing the rural economy, reversing those trends, continuing to invest in safety nets, which are important, having reforms, reducing our spending overall, and allowing Congress to take the pressure off the discretionary portion of the federal budget that has borne the weight of all of these reductions, and some departments more than others. So I'm here today to ask for your help and assistance in conveying that message to Congress that we do need to get this done. We need to get it done now. And even though there may be significant differences in various aspects of the Farm Bill that passed in the Senate and the House, those differences are dwarfed by the potential for the passage of a Farm Bill and the good that it can do and the important role it can play in turning around and reversing these long-term trends in rural America, and allowing us to continue to invest in the great and important work that you all do. One last comment. I need your help to better educate America about the importance of rural America, because it is all too often forgotten. It is a forgotten piece of America. Its contribution is not appreciated as much as it ought to be by Americans. You all have tremendous megaphones in your communities. You can point out the important role that rural America plays. You can create opportunities for folks who support the university, who may be from cities and towns and suburbs, to understand and appreciate why it's important that America continue to invest in rural America. You know, I've had a tremendous opportunity to see the hardworking people in rural America, to sit down at coffee tables in farms and small businesses, in homes of rural Americans. They care deeply about this country. They care deeply about their family. They care deeply about the ability to give their children this opportunity, but it's hard for them. It's difficult for them because they pick up the paper, they look at the media, and they don't necessarily see a supporting message. Everybody understands the significance of universities. And I woke up this morning and thought to myself, it might be kind of a good deal to be associated with the universities, so long as they had a winning football record. And then it occurred to me that's the problem. We know more about the football records of the universities here than we know about the extraordinary work that your scientists and researchers and professors are doing. I'm going to pick on one university that's in the audience today, the Ohio State. That "the" gets me, but okay. I know their coach is Urban Meyer. I know that guy's had a pretty successful run here the last couple of years. But until I visited that university, I didn't have any idea about the extraordinary work that's being done on its campus. They're figuring out how to take food and create cures for cancer. They're figuring out how to take hog waste and producing asphalt. They're really bought into this notion that the bio-based economy and rural America can do so much more. But unless you visit the campus, you don't know about these things. So it's going to be important, I think, for public universities and colleges, as it is with agriculture generally, to convey a message about the significant work that's being done on your campuses for rural America, which will underscore the important role that rural America plays in America. Because when you tell me that you can take hog waste and produce asphalt, you're telling me you're going to produce jobs. You're going to produce business opportunities. You're going to reignite manufacturing in this country. You're going to change the way in which this economy operates. You're going to be much more climate friendly. You're going to create whole new opportunities. The rest of the country needs to know what you all are doing. It is absolutely amazing. It's startling. It's inspiring what you all are doing. But I dare say that hardly anybody in the country understands and appreciates, but virtually everybody knows that Ohio State's undefeated. Until they play Michigan, and we'll see how that goes. So, you understand what I'm saying? You know this is true. And I know you work hard. I know you reach out to alumni and you do all, but we need to do a better job. Because if we don't, it becomes harder and harder to have a farm bill. It becomes harder and harder to get a budget that supports your work. It gets harder and harder for people to understand what's happening in rural America. And the result is less and less investment at a time when we need more and more investment. This is not parochial. I'm not standing up here because I'm the USDA secretary. You would expect the Secretary of Agriculture to talk this way, but that's not the reason I'm talking this way. I'm talking this way because I grew up in a city, and I went to a small town to practice law, and I've had 3 experiences in my practice as a governor and as a Secretary of Agriculture when I had to confront families whose loved one had committed suicide because they were so despondent about the condition of rural America and their operation. Those 3 stories, those 3 families will never leave me. They will never leave me. And we need to do a better job of making sure that families in rural America can look to their sons and daughters and their grandsons and granddaughters and say, if you want to move to the city, fair enough. But please know that you can change the world here. You can feed the world facing a serious challenge of food security here. You can change the American economy, make it more climate friendly and create new jobs and allow us to have an innovative edge in a competitive world here. You can preserve the natural resources that everybody from the city and suburbs flocks to when they want to get away from it all here. You don't have to go very far to experience the American dream. You can do it here. And that's my message to you, the most educated, the most sophisticated, and the most worldly of people I talk to. You all can help us convey that message about the importance of rural America. You can say to all of America, great work is being done here, and much of it will benefit rural America, and the reason it is because rural America matters to us, and it ought to matter to everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, folks. Thank you. So now is the time for you to step up and talk about the formula. We're all for it, by the way, but seriously, the opportunity for questions, if there are any. It's hard for me to see because the lights are really bright. So, boy, this is unbelievable. You mean to tell me I'm talking to a bunch of university folks and there's no, what would you think of a class that you went out and said as a professor, oh, I had questions, and you didn't have any? There we go. Sir?
Secretary Bruce McFerrin from The Ohio State University.
Okay.
Appreciate the shout out, but more importantly, your comments about the potential of our entire system. Yesterday we had a great session, and Undersecretary Wotecki was part of that session, dissecting the PCAST report on agricultural preparedness. I'm not going to ask you about capacity funds per se, but how do we build on the momentum of having that level of attention within the federal government on what we need to do in agricultural research, education, outreach?
Well, I think it's helpful that the President's Science and Technology Group basically did focus on agricultural research and understood the challenge that we face. And I think that that's reflected in this opportunity that the Farm Bill creates, and it's reflected in the President's budget. Despite difficult times, we are asking Congress to consider increases. But again, I think it's important and necessary for us to market what we do so that people understand why it's important to invest and why it's important to set up leverage opportunities that the healthcare area has that agriculture does not have. And this was brought home to me very clearly and starkly when I was having a conversation with one of our folks at USDA, and I said, well, you know, the reason why the National Institute of Health gets all this money is because they can go out and they can market to the rest of the country, hey, we can cure cancer. That's a pretty powerful, and every other disease imaginable. That's a pretty powerful message. And she looked at me and she said, well, we can prevent cancer. Sort of a revelation. Didn't think about it that way. Never been marketed to me that way. Never been, I don't think, really very effectively marketed to the rest of the country that agriculture has this capacity. You know, never mind the challenge that we face in just physically feeding 9 billion people 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and never mind the challenge we're going to have with a more intense climate. You know, we're focused on this at USDA. We're creating climate change hubs, and we're trying to figure out how to help our producers continue to mitigate and adapt to this changing world that they live in. But we're doing it in isolation. We're doing it without the rest of the country understanding, hey, this is a wake-up call. You know, we're seeing this extraordinary devastation in the Philippines, worst typhoon that's ever hit landmass. Well, now, why do you think that's all happening? And do you think that's just an isolated incident? Oh, well, maybe Hurricane Sandy was just an isolated incident. You know, and maybe the tsunami was just an isolated incident. And maybe the drought was just an isolated incident. Or maybe there's something going on here that we need to be very seriously focused on, and we need research, because if we don't get it and don't mitigate and adapt to it, we won't be able to feed 9 billion people. And if we think we have an unsafe and terrorized world today, wait till you see folks really genuinely fighting over scarce natural resources and food and water. This is a matter of national security. It needs to be marketed that way. This is an opportunity for us to create a new economy. It needs to be marketed that way. This is an opportunity for us to prevent disease, not necessarily cure it. It needs to be marketed that way. And if it is, then people in positions of power will understand, hey, this requires investment and we've got to make sacrifices, we've got to make choices, but this is a choice we got to make. And that's what we're trying to do at USDA. The increases that we're proposing are never near as much as they ought to be, but in the context of this budget that I've got, you understand the fact that we're willing to consider and talk about an increase in certain aspects of research suggests that it's a high priority for us, because I understand the risk if we don't. So I think the public universities and colleges can help us amplify that message and market it more effectively, and I think you can encourage the farm groups in your states to do so as well. That it isn't just about the farm safety net, and it isn't just about this squabble that we're having over SNAP. Those are really significant, they're very important, but there is a whole lot more in that farm bill that's incredibly important as well, and you just don't hear about it. We have to raise the awareness of people, and we have to do it in an integrated, coordinated fashion. This organization has the capacity to send that kind of message. Yes, sir.
Bill Lacey from the University of California, Davis. Mr. Secretary, really appreciate your comments, and you've made a very compelling argument that the Farm Bill is far more than just farms. It's food, it's health, environment, energy, and rural development. But we continue to name this bill the Farm Bill, even though we've tried in the past to rename it. We don't market it very well because we're constantly trying to defend a farm bill rather than all those other compelling arguments you made about what is in the Farm Bill. How do we proceed? Do we think about renaming it, and how do we market that bill?
Well, I went to Chairwoman Stabenow with that very notion, that we needed to at least refer to it as a food, farm, and jobs bill, because it's all of that and much more. I mean, you could have a very long title, but it is a food bill. There's no doubt about that. It is a farm bill, and there is clearly a jobs bill. And she responded by putting it pretty much in the title of the Senate version of the bill. The House was less enamored with that notion. I got to the point in my office last year where I started fining people for referring it just to the Farm Bill. I collected a fairly healthy little pot of cash, which we donated to the food bank. But I'll tell you, that is a hard thing to break. And we got some friends here from the media here. Alan, do you refer to it as the Farm Bill?
I talk about food stamps too.
Yeah, you talk about food stamps and the safety net. But you know, I'm not faulting these guys because they got to cover what is topical at the time, what people are focused on. That's my point. We need to raise the awareness of this bill so that the press is compelled and forced to discuss it in broader terms. As it is now, it's a pretty simple article to write. Farm safety net versus food for struggling families. Compelling argument. Just totally misses the point. The fact is that the SNAP program is part of the food safety net for farmers. It's part of the farm safety net. Because, you know, if you can buy more at the grocery store, you're going to buy more, which means that folks are going to be able to sell more eventually from the farm, right? You know, more has to be packaged, processed, trucked, shipped, refrigerated. All those are job opportunities. You know, so it's part of the safety net. Conversely, the farm programs that pay farmers when times are tough and the crop insurance program, that's part of helping all of us have access to food because it reduces and lowers the risk of farming, which is pretty damn great. You know, if Urban Meyer does everything he's supposed to do as a football coach, and he coaches those kids and they do everything they tell him that he tells them to do, by golly, they win ball games, and he's up there. A farmer equivalent to Urban Meyer could do exactly the same thing on his farm or her farm, could do everything right, and Mother Nature could come in and completely wipe out the crop. If you don't reduce the risk of farming, then not as many people are going to farm. People aren't going to be interested in that. They're going to be more willing to sell their land to a developer to allow that suburb and that city to keep expanding. And so we eventually will not be that food secure nation we are today, with unlimited opportunity to basically feed ourselves, which we take for granted in this country and shouldn't. It is a remarkable thing. And it hasn't always been the case for this country. And because we do it so efficiently, we essentially give consumers more money in their pockets when they leave the grocery store, which means they can use those resources to fund the consumer economy that we have. And all those widgets and gadgets that we're buying, we're able to buy them because we don't pay as much for food as some other folks do around the world. Hardly anybody understands that. But that farm safety net reduces the risk to a point where people are willing to continue to do it. So, you know, I think we have to market this differently, but they're not going to write about the Food, Farm, and Jobs bill until we have a unified message within agriculture about the importance of agriculture generally, that we start pushing it back against all this negativity that's coming out about agriculture, a lot of stuff that's just not accurate, not the full story, doesn't understand the context, because it's simple. It's been simple to pick on farms and farmers. We got to start pushing back a little bit on this, because if we don't, it's going to become, as it has been, exceedingly more difficult to get the investments that are going to be essential. And just think 50 years from now, if we don't invest in research, if we don't figure out how to mitigate and adapt to climate change, if we see changing growing seasons to the point where we're no longer growing the great abundance that we grow in this country, do you think America's going to be stronger or weaker if that happens? If we have fewer and fewer families with young folks living in rural areas, who actually is going to go into military service? Going to be stronger or weaker? If we cede the research ground on using food as cures for disease or developing a bio-based economy that's more climate friendly to some other country, are we going to be stronger or weaker if we do that? Good heavens. This is about the future of the country, the strength of the country. It's about the American experience. It's about all those things, which is why it's frustrating that we have to fight about the budget. It's frustrating that we have to beg to pass a farm bill, and it's absolutely incredible that we aren't passing immigration reform so we have adequate number of people working on the farm to produce this great abundance, and we make it a little bit easier for you to retain those bright students that used to be coming to your campuses in droves from foreign countries, but now because of all this falderall aren't coming to your campuses in as great numbers and are staying home, and they're making their universities and colleges far more competitive. It's really pretty simple. The President had it right. A budget, a farm bill, and immigration reform. Those three things have got to happen, and they've got to happen soon in order for us to begin really reversing the trends, and we have to market all of this more effectively and better. Thank you all very much.